Hello, folks. We are about to go live here with the one and only Wolf McNally. Welcome, Wolf, to Redbeard Live.
It's great to be here, Keith. Thank you.
Now, we're talking about something today that's fascinating, which is how to be less dumb. Now, you have fancier words than that, but that's basically what the app that you built does, is it helps us think more clearly and ideally recognize where we're going to screw up, where we're going to have a breakdown in our decision making before we get there. And of course, I have a story to start off why that's so important. There I was on my first mountain climb at Mount Rainier. I was a participant on the climb. I only just found out the Tuesday, or it was always the Monday of that week, that I was going to get on this climb because someone else had to drop out. And I'd just been up there the week before, halfway at the mountain, vomiting my guts out for hours, which, you know, who doesn't want that part of the story? And I finally found out I get to go. Oh, how exciting. My first big mountain climb. And it's April, which is early season for climbing. And we pack up, we go up there to the halfway up, and then we sleep for a little bit. And then we head off 11 p.m. because that's when you start climbing. And so you're doing everything in the dark. And I'd gotten new boots for this climb because it was a winter climb. April is still considered a winter climb, so I had extra heavy duty boots instead of my normal mountaineering boots. Well, on the boots, you put crampons, those spiky things. Now, I, not being an idiot, had already gone up there and tested out my new boots with my old crampons to make sure they work. But you already know where the story's going. While they worked in my one test, when it came time to actually climb the mountain, I'm actually roped into other people. It's the middle of the night. We're walking past crevasses that could kill us. Turns out my crampons didn't work. I didn't discover this until they were sort of falling off. I kept on stopping, and the rope leader was saying, "What's wrong with these things?" And he finally takes a look and he says, "They're not attached right." Well, it turns out that I never attached them right. I never knew this one little locking mechanism thing. It's with the old boots, it didn't matter. They were sufficiently well fitted that it always worked. Whereas with these new boots, which are much bigger because they're for winter climbing, they worked the one time I tested it out for half an hour. But when it actually came time to use them, it was only embarrassing and got a lot of folks cold as we fixed the problem. But it could have been disastrous because I didn't actually understand how to use the tools. And I didn't see ahead far enough to say, it was probably going to work. It seemed fine. My one test, it's fine. So when I think about the Flying Logic app that you're about to share with us, how that whole thing works, I think you're exposing those problems in thinking before you're up there on a mountain with the crampon has just fallen off your foot. It's gone into the crevasse. You're now in the middle of a snowfield, and your whole team's having to work together to keep you from dying because you didn't think ahead. It's a little bit dramatic, but the results of not thinking ahead in business can be very dramatic. So would you, first off, before telling us about your app, would you give us a bit of the backstory about how you came to build this app that helps us think better?
Yeah, well, actually, I want to ask a question about your story. So you had that issue. What would you say is, the question I always ask myself in these situations is, what could I do next time so this doesn't happen again? So what was the lesson you learned? I mean, to do more stress tests, to check your equipment differently?
With that particular tool, the appropriate lesson was, make sure you understand how it works before you use it. Just because it's working does not mean you understand how it works. And once I got into a situation that was not normal with new boots on the high mountain where it really matters, because I'd used my crampons plenty of times before. I'd climbed mountains before, but never that mountain, never that big. So it's understand that just because something is working does not mean you know how it works. And the other thing is understand what the failure modes are. I was into the same climbing club. I was almost down in a crevasse in training. So I've climbed down 10 or 15 feet into a crack in the ice, where this is the kind of thing you fall down it and you die, maybe. And so we're training how to get each other back out. And I'm down there just hanging out because my team's up top on the snow, and they're arranging all the ropes to go drag me back out as if I was unconscious, okay? And I'm just hanging out, relaxing, and then suddenly, and I can't really do this move justice, but my knee is up by my ear, and I'm upside down. This is not good. Nothing happened, and yet I'm suddenly half upside down. So I start screaming for my team because I'm in a crevasse. If this harness breaks, if I actually fall down in here, best cases is unfortunate, but I could easily break an ankle. I probably won't die because we have our entire fleet of team there. I'm not going to die, but this could be life-changing. So I'm screaming.
Yeah.
They can't hear me. That's interesting because they're a whole 10 feet or 15 feet away. Well, it turns out the particular climbing harness I was using had this one little connection, which unlike some other harnesses where this one piece of webbing is permanent and it can't move, this one, it can actually slip undone if you touch it just right. And I didn't know there was a failure mode. It never happened before. It had not occurred to me that I could be hanging out in a crevasse. And this one little piece of webbing can come loose and suddenly the whole harness moves. And now I'm hanging with my knee by my ear, wondering, what am I going to do here? So in both these cases, it's everything worked fine in the past. Therefore, I thought I knew how my tools worked.
But something changed.
And then as soon as something changed, I wasn't ready for it because I didn't think. I knew that I knew how these things worked. And I was completely wrong.
Yeah, and of course, that's one of our most important cognitive biases is thinking we know how something is going to go and taking for granted that we know. And so to get into the answer to your question, Flying Logic is software, but it's designed to support a set of thinking processes, ways of being reasonable. So just having the software, it doesn't think for you. It doesn't by itself make you a better thinker, but assuming you already know how to think, it facilitates really clean, clear thinking. I was inspired years ago to write the software when I first encountered the teachings of a guy named Elihu M. Goldratt, an Israeli man, a professor. And I was actually introduced to his writings by a former CEO for a startup I worked for. And he said, you really have to read this particular book. It wasn't Goldratt's book. It was this book. It's Thinking for a Change by Lisa M. Scheinkopf. And what inspired me about it was the fact that it has these visual diagrams in it. And I'm a very visual thinker. And so when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is like thinking logically and visually. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So I read the book with great interest. And then I read Elihu Goldratt's book, The Goal, which is actually a business novel. And that's his book. And it's been so popular.
I think I read it back about when I was in college. And I think I don't think I got it. I probably got it a little bit, but it's probably when I need to go back with a benefit of a decade in business or running my own business and go, okay.
It's like any classic, you get new things out of it every time you read it. In fact, it's been so popular, it's been adapted into a graphic novel. So this is actually a graphic novel based on The Goal.
What?
Where it deals with the same story of a manufacturing plant manager who inherits a failing plant and needs to figure it out. And there's a Jedi master like figure named Jonah who appears a number of times throughout the story and kind of drops pearls of wisdom, but not the whole solution. He makes the main character, the protagonist, figure it out, but he just kind of gives him a little key to it, and then we watch his thought processes unfold as he figures it out. And the Goldratt's processes of improvement, which he called the theory of constraints, he initially applied to manufacturing, but since then they've been applied to all kinds of fields of human endeavor, business and personal and things like that. So, and so this really excited me. And of course, I didn't have the graphic novel. I read the original novel, and they're both great. Of course, different media, you have to make different trade-offs. So, but I like the idea that they're making the basic idea of the theory of constraints, TOC, applicable to the generations of the shorter attention spans.
I'm just sharing climbing stories today. So I want to share a story that I discovered recently, a constraint that's embarrassing. Okay. It really wouldn't be a Redbeard podcast or a Redbeard Live if I wasn't sharing personal stories.
Yeah.
This last summer, I did 75 hard. So 75 days of working out, 2 45-minute sessions a day, no rest days. And as you might imagine, I got more fit by the end of it. Fantastic. Then went off, got married, went on a honeymoon, stopped moving so much.
Mm-hmm.
Then, okay, it's time to go get back into working out. So I go back to the rowing machine, which I was doing 45 minutes on almost every day, going 5 or 6 kilometers almost every day. And I go turn on one of the automated class things. And after 11 minutes, my arms are just hurting. And I'm a bit out of breath from going at a reasonable pace here. And I think, I love being on the mountains, but I know that the constraint right now for me climbing Mount Rainier again this summer, which we usually start training in the wintertime if we're serious at all for the summer, I know it's not going to be rope skills. Yeah, I need to brush up on that, or crevasse rescue, or making sure my crampons are properly locked. those things are easy. It's actually my cardio, as evidenced by the feedback I'm getting from the rowing machine in November. That's telling me, okay, I could do everything else right, but if I could get as strong as I want to get, but if this one thing up, because mountain climbing, what's summit day? Summit day is you leave base camp around 10 p.m. to midnight, and then you're continuously moving, except for a short break at the top, until about 8 p.m. the next day is often the case. Yeah, like 20 hours of continuous movement with very few breaks. Your ability to continue doing that is dependent mostly on your cardio ability. Now, you have to have the muscles and all the other skills, but I can see even right now, maybe 6 months before I go up for a climb, this is the problem. And if I actually want to climb, there's only one thing I need to do, and it's not get my ice axe in my hands. And it's not, and here's the hard part, it's not even get out to Mount Rainier. I want to go out there, but if I spend the hours to get out there, and then I can only snowshoe hard for half an hour before I gas out, or an hour going up these hills, I would have been better spent to not go to the mountain at all and just go get on my rowing machine or put some running shoes on. That's the constraint. And so this idea that we're talking about here, it's not like just for your business or just for a sales funnel. It's actually properly understood. It can help you lie to yourself less in every area of your life, including your fitness.
Absolutely. And you put your finger right on it. I mean, you're a mountain climber. Your goal is to climb that mountain successfully. And what Goldratt would call your throughput is the rate at which you achieve success. That means how fast you climb the mountain, how successful you climb the mountain, how often you climb the mountain, things like that. That would be the throughput. So the boundaries of your system as a mountain climber are you climb mountains, and that's the measure of your success. So, but the rate at which you achieve your throughput is limited by something called the constraint. Now, systems are complex. People say, well, systems have a lot of constraints. But one of Goldratt's key ideas was that even complex systems, even though they have many constraints in them, there's only one or two key constraints that, if broken, if elevated, if moved, if increased capacity, actually elevate the throughput. Everything else you can optimize, like you can, get greater muscle strength. But if your cardio is the limiting constraint, all the muscle strength in the world is not going to help you. And so you identified the constraint, and that's like the first step of the theory of constraints, which is basically a 5-step process.
It's not fun, Wolf. I would rather go out and climb in the mountains. I see my friends on Instagram who they're very serious, way more serious than I am. They're out there ice climbing. They're out there going up Kilimanjaro. They're doing amazing things. And I don't like the answer that I should just go running more often or go get on the rowing machine. It's not sexy. I want to go have a reason to go buy another 4-season tent or something. Like to do a fun thing. That working on what I know is my constraint here is boring.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the chief kind of aspects of procrastination is we want to do the fun stuff instead of the effective stuff.
Show, folks. Bye.
Yeah, we're done here.
So back it up. Yeah. A little less truth.
So once you've identified your system, like mountain climber or business owner, owner of your business, and your throughput measure is profit, you have to identify your constraints. And once you do that, then you have to decide how to exploit those constraints. So for example, obviously you have a certain cardio capacity. You want to take full advantage of whatever cardio capacity you have. That's even before you raise your cardio capacity. You want to make sure, you walk correctly, you wear the right shoes, and so to make sure you are taking full advantage of that. The next step after that is you want to subordinate everything else to the constraint you identify, which is, and what that basically means is, if you need to increase cardio capacity, why are you lifting weights? Or why are you doing something that, why are you changing your diet? When cardio is treadmill, is rower, is whatever. And so subordinating everything else to that constraint becomes the key at that point.
I did an next episode on my podcast that's going to air as the last Tuesday of 2021. It's with Alexander Cortez, and it's all about your personal narrative and how it relates to your body and how you move through the world. We dove in really deep into my mountain climbing identity and also my fantasy of being a mountain climber. Mm-hmm. And if anyone's not subscribed yet, redbeard.am, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, because that episode is going to kick you in the gut. But it's also going to prepare you as you're closing out 2021 for 2022 and becoming more of the person you actually want to be.
That's awesome. I'm subbed. So the next step after that is there's 5 steps. And so we talked about 1, identify the system's constraints. 2, decide how to exploit those constraints. 3, subordinate everything else in the system to those constraints. The 4th step is alleviate the system's constraints. This would be actually increasing your cardio capacity somehow. I mean, elite athletes use, blood doping or whatever or high altitude training to increase their blood oxygen carrying capacity and so on. I'm sure you do similar things probably, or at least, more cardio work, right? But that's
I'm only a little bit serious. And so what I do is I just go up to the mountain. It's a couple hours drive for me. And then I train at elevation.
Exactly. So
I live on sea level. Camp Muir is 1 mile in elevation up, 1 mile vertical elevation. That's the paradise, rather, where the parking lot is. So I can drive there. I drive 1 mile up. And then Camp Muir is a mile further up than that vertical elevation. And the summit is a mile further up from that. So if I just snowshoe from the parking lot up to Camp Muir as fast as I can go, that's relatively functional. And I just want to go give a shout out. Scott, you're listening to us at 3 a.m. That's amazing. And I'm just really happy to see you here. Hello, Scott. Okay, so
let me just complete the cycle here. So you do what it takes to alleviate the system's constraints. And the 5th step is you decide whether or not the constraint has been broken. And that basically means that the constraint at this point is no longer the constraint. If your cardio capacity is sufficient, is basically no longer going to live in a constraint, the constraint then can be identified somewhere else. And it might be your equipment. It might be your skills with the equipment. It might be the people you choose to climb with. It could be anywhere. But if you want to keep improving, you have to keep identifying the constraints. So it's really a process of continual improvement, looping through these 5 steps. And so that's the core idea. That improvement requires change. But since not all improvement is change, you have to determine what change actually is improvement and distinguish it from all the changes you can make, which aren't improvement. They might be improvement in some little area, but if they don't address the constraint, then they don't address your throughput. They don't address the rate at which your system is achieving its goal.
Yeah.
And so
if I went and trained in yoga every day for an hour, I would get more flexible. I'd get a little bit stronger. I would definitely 100% increase my injury prevention, which is important for mountain climbing. But I wouldn't actually be able to climb more mountains, except to the extent to which I got injured less often, so I could climb more often. But it wouldn't actually make me safer very much to get up Mount Rainier, because the cardio is so clearly the big thing.
Exactly. And sometimes the constraints are easy to identify, and other times they're not clear at all, especially when you have, say, a company and you have, maybe you're coming into a company as a manager and you have all kinds of complaints from all over the company. We have high customer churn or low customer satisfaction or high employee turnover, whatever. And you have all these symptoms, but you don't know what the root causes are. And so Goldratt said that since you need to figure out what to change to, and how to cause the change, we need a system of thinking processes that guide us through that process of determining the answer to those 3 questions: what to change to, and how to cause the change. And so the theory of constraints is a great idea. It's a great set of steps, but you have to have ways of thinking support that. And that's where these visual diagrams come in. They're called the theory of constraints thinking processes. And they're a set of kind of cause and effect based thinking tools that can be used as like a toolbox. You can pull out the ones that you want to know. Like, for example, if you want to know why these things are going wrong, what's the root cause, you use what's called a current reality tree. And so the diagrams I showed you in Lisa Scheinkopf's book, where A is connected to B, that connected to could mean either A causes B or A is necessary for B to happen. And so learning to think in terms of this necessary or sufficient, sufficient and or necessary way of thinking is, again, part of the thinking you need to do before you even pick up my tool, Flying Logic. Now, you can obviously use the tool for anything you want. The tool itself doesn't make you think this way, but if you learn how to think this way, then the tool is much more effective. And my tool, for instance, I wrote an ebook called Thinking with Flying Logic that teaches you these techniques. It's separate from the user guide, which teaches you how to use the software. Thinking with Flying Logic teaches you how to use these techniques, and you can just read it. You don't have to read these other books if you don't want to, but I highly recommend them. And so the software itself is designed to help you create these diagrams. Now, how does it do that? Because people look at my software and they say, it looks like Visio. It looks like Lucid Chart. So it looks like something like that, because it's got boxes, it's got lines, it's got colors, it's got text. But if you just stop there and you think, oh, well, it's like those things, it's just a diagramming tool, you would miss the point entirely. Because the way these processes were handled before Flying Logic is that people would get together in groups, they'd put sticky notes up on whiteboards, or they'd hand, and they put, yarn on the boards, or, and it's a mess. Okay. Try to keep this straight. It might be good for like the brain or initial brainstorming steps, but it's really hard to create an accurate diagram, because the whole purpose of creating these diagrams is then to communicate either to yourself or to the group you're working with what is true, what everybody can buy into, especially in a group setting, because you need to create as much consensus as possible to be able to do these things like subordinate everything to the constraint. If you identify the constraint, if everybody in the company realizes that this thing over there is the constraint, everybody will make sure that that constraint is getting fed and elevated properly. Whereas if you don't have that buy-in, they can't do it.
What are some of the results some of your clients have seen who have used Flying Logic to update their decision making in their company?
Yeah, that's interesting, because Flying Logic has actually been out for 14 years, and I can talk about that story of how Flying Logic came about and why everybody hasn't heard of it, which is I just want
to hear the results. What are the results?
My issue. Yeah.
Interacting with Flying
Logic. The fact is that, obviously there's a lot of testimonies about theory of constraints thinking processes. In terms of Flying Logic, my software is used by government, 3-letter agencies, by universities, by companies. I've literally had a company tell me that they don't want to give me a use case, a case study, because they don't want their competitors to know they use Flying Logic. And so what I joke is that most of my customers, because they use it for strategic planning and so on, if they told me what they do with Flying Logic, they'd have to kill me. So I don't actually have a lot of case studies. I have a lot of testimonials, and you can see some of them on my website, flyinglogic.com. Thank you for putting that up. And I do have, ongoing chat in our Discord chat and so on, where people are talking about and things like that, and examples people are putting up in my forum of how they use Flying Logic. Some of these, but in terms of well-developed case studies, I'm still working on that. And part of why I'm still working on that after 14 years of publishing it is because for many years I neglected to market it. I wrote it and had the false idea that if I build it, they will come, and that was, my own blind spot. Yeah, exactly. Because, I envisioned myself as a maker of things, not a marketer of what I made. That was kind of beneath me, but I've gotten over myself, what's that?
That's a different live stream.
Absolutely. But now I'm full on actually marketing what I made, because it's some of the best work I ever did. And so, and if actually, if anyone here wants the full story of that, I have a podcast. It's called Beware of Wolf. You can go to bewareofwolf.com.
Beware of Wolf or Beware of Wolf?
Beware of Wolf. Sorry, talking too fast.
I'm excited too.
I know, this is exciting to get to talk about this. The podcast is called Beware of Wolf. And it's basically about higher and whole brain thinking, critical thinking and creative thinking, and kind of integrated brain thinking, which I think is my personal larger mission here. Flying Logic is designed to support specifically critical thinking, and it can be used for a lot of things other than the theory of constraint thinking processes, even though that's kind of what motivated it originally. Thank you. Sorry, what was your question?
So here's my two final questions. One is, how long does it take someone after they start playing with Flying Logic to start to see some benefit from using the app?
Yeah, well, I want people to become versed in the app as quickly as possible. It can be a bit daunting, even though the interface, actually, once you get used to it, is very intuitive. But you have to get over the idea that you can just
So I'm curious about results. Does someone, if they use Flying Logic and they put up a simple decision tree, will it tell them, say, the same day will update their thinking in some way that puts cash in their pocket? Or does it take a while and you have to build out a more complex use case before this app can put money in your pocket?
So let's say you have a specific goal you have in mind. You've already decided what to change, and you want to break it down into a set of steps. You can do what's called a transition tree in an hour or less, actually, which basically breaks down all the goals, subtasks that you need to do, and help you decide what order to do them in that makes sense based on what is true in the world at that time. And you can, become versed in that in a day. I do twice weekly webinars, getting people up to speed on the software itself. So
if I sign up right now and I know I have a problem in my business and I use this app to interact with the problem, I can probably
Yes.
get some kind of benefit today, so I can be making better decisions by tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that's true. I mean, it would be a fairly intensive day, and might be better if you had like I'm developing a course where I go through all these things. I'll be going through all these things in video. I do coaching myself, so if you want to get up to speed on it even faster, I can coach you directly. But the software itself, yeah, you can become familiar with it in a day. You can and then it's like any path of mastery. There's levels that you go through in terms of you're learning how to use these tools and so on. But yeah, you can become productive within a fairly intense day of study and practice.
And I'm looking here at bewareofwolf.com. I'm looking at your podcast episodes about yak shaving, the nature of the problem and the solution, how to better understand things, critical thinking. So that's one way, folks, if you're interested in this, maybe don't want to dive into the app quite yet, bewareofwolf.com. And then flyinglogic.com. When someone goes there, I'm looking at the site, there's a try it for free button in the corner there. So it sounds like to go get started, that they should just click that button and then go start playing and see if they can go make a little bit less bad decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And there's a little 2-minute video on the website right at the top that basically kind of gives you a quick kind of trailer of the kinds of things you can do with Flying Logic, and will hopefully get you excited about trying it.
Beautiful. Okay, folks watching, here's my ask. When you go try out Flying Logic, I want you to put on Twitter or wherever you're watching this, leave a comment telling us what problem you applied Flying Logic to and how it helped you stop thinking as bad as you were before. Whatever that looks like, to go get us more use cases. As Wolf's saying, a lot of the people, you're only aware of maybe 10% of the use cases that exist, because so many folks use this privately to make better decisions in private and don't expose to you the ways in which they're benefiting. So if you listen to this live stream and then you start using Flying Logic and it makes you more money, I want to hear about it. I'm ready.
Let us know. Yeah.
Ryan on all social media. And then Wolf, what's your best social media profile for folks to go communicate with you about this?
Yeah. So at Flying Logic on Twitter is the main kind of Twitter feed. I also have at Wolf McNally for my kind of personal stuff. If you just want to email me directly, wolf@wolfmcnally.com. And wolfmcnally.com is kind of my general. I'm a creative technologist. I've worked on many projects, so I talk about technology there in general. But wolf@wolfmcnally.com.
Okay, folks, we got a Flying Logic on Twitter. For the podcast, we're going to go to Beware of Wolf, and then you go get the app, start playing, and start making more money, maybe by tomorrow, by making fewer bad decisions, like not knowing how your climbing harness works or not fitting your crampons to your boots. Go over to flyinglogic.com. Wolf, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks you so much for having me, Brian.